Hello and welcome to News Desk. I'm Biresh Banerjee. In the past 18 hours, India has attacked 9 sites in Pakistan that it says are terrorist facilities. Pakistan has responded by calling it an act of war and authorized its military to take corresponding actions. Tensions are high and no one knows if they will spiral. It's why we are looking at this today on News Desk instead of our planned discussion on Ukraine.
So thank you very much for still being with us. I'm Alex Forrest-Whiting. And to help us with this week's discussion, let me introduce you to the rest of the table. At the end, we have DW reporter Beenish Javed with us. Thank you very much for jumping in at the last moment. We appreciate that.
She's had a very long night.
She has had a long night.
She's been in the studio the whole night.
And very little sleep, a bit like you as well, I have to say. And also, we have Dustin Hammerline, who will be with you in the chat, as ever, also helping me. And so we do encourage you to put your questions and your comments in our chat, which we will try to bring in, or certainly we'll try to bring in as many as possible, so it would be great to hear from you. And while you are considering what to send, this is what those strikes looked like. Now, there are reports that these were partly conducted using the same missile that's being used in Ukraine. And these strikes began around 1:44 in the morning, India time. In an initial release, India said that no military targets were hit.
Right, that was some footage that was from early in the morning coming from Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Now, while these attacks happened overnight, Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, in a press conference later in the morning, said that this was partly to respond to a deadly attack that occurred on tourists in Pahalgam in Indian-administered Kashmir 2 weeks back. But he also clarified that there were other reasons behind these strikes.
Our intelligence monitoring of Pakistan-based terrorist modules indicated that further attacks against India were impending. There was thus a compulsion both to deter and to preempt. Earlier this morning, as you would be aware, India exercised its right to respond and preempt as well as deter more such cross-border attacks. These actions were measured, non-escalatory, proportionate, and responsible. They focused on dismantling the terrorist infrastructure and disabling terrorists likely to be sent across to India.
Let's bring in DW correspondent Shalu Yadav, who's been reporting from Delhi and has had quite the day following developments, not just in Delhi, but across the border in Pakistan as well. Shalu, let's just talk about that press conference, about Vikram Misri was saying there. He was saying that India targeted terrorist facilities and that those were destroyed. But what do we mean by terrorist facilities? What kind of facilities were these?
So as per the government, the Indian government, these were actually launch pads, so-called launch pads, where these militant outfits were being trained to carry out attacks against India. And not just for this, they have not just held them responsible for this particular attack that happened on 22nd April. They said that these kind of outfits have been trained and harbored by Pakistani government for years, and they've carried many attacks in India. In fact, he went on to say that Pakistan has a reputation, for being, in his exact words, he said that they have a well-deserved reputation for being a haven for terrorists around the world. And for the first time, Biresh, the Indian government officially spelt out the name of the militant outfit, the Resistance Front, or the Kashmir Resistance, as it's also called. And it said for the first time officially that it is an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is a banned militant outfit. And it accuses the Pakistani government of harboring such outfits. Yeah,
we were having that discussion here as well, because in the initial stages, in the initial days after this Pahalgam attack, you had the TRF, basically the Resistance Front that you're talking about, claim responsibility and then withdraw responsibility. Was there anything more on the TRF that emerged in this press conference, that any more details that India could provide about the TRF? I ask simply because the question of evidence is something that has always been raised by Pakistan.
Yes, that's right. I mean, Pakistan has time and again asked for evidence from the Indian government, but the Indian government is very sure about who is behind this attack. Now, let me just take you back a little to the history of the resistance force. Now, this group of militants apparently came up after 2019 when the Indian government took away the autonomous status of Kashmir, which led to a lot of disillusionment, a lot of despair amongst people, locals in Kashmir, and it also led to an offshoot of this sort of like a group emerged to sort of express its resistance against the government's move of 2019. Now, as far as today's press conference is concerned, the Foreign Secretary did not spell out more than the name of this front and the fact that this is an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba, which he said is a UN proscribed militant outfit. Biresh.
This press conference itself, I was watching this press conference, as were many across India and Pakistan, and it seemed to have a lot of symbolism to it as well, didn't it? You had 2 women officers of the armed forces who were present, and also the name of the operation that was conducted, Operation Sindoor. Can you talk a bit about the symbolism there?
Yes, sure. So Sindoor, for our audience who doesn't understand Hindi, Sindoor is a Hindi word for vermilion. It's a red color sort of powder that married women apply in their hair, just in the middle of the partition of their hair. And it's a symbol of being married. It's a symbol of being prosperously married, so to say. So in Hinduism, it's sort of like a big deal. So I think that this name of the operation was very carefully chosen by the government as a mark of respect for those women, the 26 women who lost their husbands in that attack. Now, we do know that most of these men who were killed were Hindus, and they were asked reportedly by these militants about their religion before they were killed. And so I think this name was deliberately chosen as a mark of respect for those widows, of the victims of this attack. And another thing that really stood out was the selection of the officers from the forces who gave out the details of this operation. It was sort of like a message to say to those perpetrators that this is a revenge from those widows, from the women of the country. And the third thing that stood out for me, Biresh, was the religion of these 2 female officers. Now, you might remember that the Foreign Secretary also pointed out in that press conference that the motive behind this terror attack was to create some sort of communal tensions amongst the people of this country between Hindus and Muslims. And I think that the selection of these 2 female officers and of being of 2 different religions, one a Hindu and one a Muslim, also sent out a message that the perpetrators did not succeed in their aim.
Now, Pakistan has responded to these attacks, and there have been claims coming from Pakistan that it shot down some Indian fighter jets. I want to talk to you about that, but just let's listen to what the Pakistan military spokesman, Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif Chaudhry, had to say about that. We'll just like to play that sound right now.
Pakistan armed forces could have shot even more than 10 of their aircraft, but we exercised restraint, and at no time any of their aircraft was allowed to enter into Pakistan's airspace. And also at no time, none of Pakistan aircraft went into Indian airspace.
Shala, do we know more about these claims about Indian aircraft being shot down?
Well, Biresh, these are very choppy waters for us to get into, and we have been here before in 2019 and 2016. Whenever there's a conflict or a confrontation of this serious nature happens between the 2 countries, claims are made about inflicting maximum damage, by both on the other side. So we cannot say for sure. It's not an information that the Indian government has given a confirmation on, or neither have they denied this information. But what we can tell you that is is that we heard from some sources and some eyewitnesses in at least 3 parts of northern India where unidentified debris of aircrafts have been found, Biresh. But then there's a lot of fog around this operation about what's happened on both sides of the border. And as and when we have more information, we'll keep our audiences updated.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see this, Shalu, but then that's part of the some of the debris that has been found in Indian administered Kashmir. And I think this is what you were talking about. It is unidentified as to what exactly, which part of which aircraft this is. But this is some of the visuals that have come from the northern part of India, as you were saying, Shalu. I just need to ask you. I mean, you've had this warlike situation that has developed. Is India expecting somewhat of a response, a military response from Pakistan now?
I think we can safely say that it seems so, because just a day before these overnight strikes, the Indian government announced mock drills for the citizens of this country in various parts of India. And these mock drills just happened just a few hours ago, and they've wrapped up. And in these mock drills, the citizens were trained on how to respond to air raid warning system, how to evacuate in the case of an attack. And mind you, this kind of exercise is quite unprecedented, because the last time India saw this kind of exercise was in 1971, when India went to war with Pakistan. So given the situation on the ground, and the fact that the Home Minister has reportedly called all army personnel on leave to immediately come back and report to duty, they have closed several airports all along the northern belt of India. So all of these things point to the fact that the two countries are inching closer towards a wider conflict, if not a full-blown war.
Could I just intervene there? We have had a lot of questions and comments in our chat, which is very busy. DeVos is asking a question, basically asking, this appears to be the biggest escalation between two nuclear powers. Let's not forget that both Pakistan and India are nuclear powers. He says since 2009, question mark. But I'd just love to get your from a historical point of view, when did we last see this type of escalation? You did say 2016, you did mention 2019, but is this more, is this bigger than it was even then?
Yes, I think except for war situations, I think this is being seen as the biggest escalation so far between the two countries, because we remember that in 2016 and 2019 the Indian armed forces had struck some areas in Pakistan, but this time experts are saying that India has gone even deeper inside the territory of Pakistan, even beyond Pakistan-administered Kashmir. So in that sense, it seems pretty unprecedented. Also, the fact that all three forces were involved, the naval forces, the air force, and the armed forces, which makes it quite unprecedented and bigger on scale.
Shalu, you had quite a long day, and I don't want to keep you long. I just want to get one final question in to you. How would you describe the mood in the country at the moment? Is it apprehensive? Is it fearful? Is it jubilant? How would you describe it?
So let me take you 15 days back. So when this attack happened, of course, there was a lot of anger, and there was a lot of domestic pressure on the Indian government to retaliate, to bring the perpetrators to justice. And then there was a lot of anticipation as to what's going to happen next, what's India going to do. And then we saw, it started with small measures like, holding the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. And then we cancelled some of the trade agreements between the two countries, and airspaces were closed. And then there was this there was this build-up in the country, around this. There was a lot of anticipation that something big is going to happen, but we didn't know what. So the anger sort of translated into anticipation. And today, when our team went out to speak to the people on the streets, they were very appreciative. There was a clamor for revenge, and then they felt avenged by India's act against Pakistan. And now we are also seeing, some people calling for de-escalation because they are invoking the people living along the borders of the two countries, the line of control, the de facto border where a lot of villages are, and they are the first victims whenever such escalation happens between the two countries. Mind you, over the last 15 days, we've seen incessant firing and artillery on both sides of the border, and a lot of civilians have had to lose their lives. So a lot of people are invoking their lives as well and saying that, is it worth it?
Shalu Yadav in Delhi. We'll leave it there for the moment. Thanks so much for bringing us up to date with those developments in Delhi. Thanks so much. Shalu was there talking about going out into the streets and talking to people in the city. We do have those sound bites. I think it's just worth listening to those sound bites. Then I'd like to come to you, Beenish, and take a response from you on that.
These people took the lives of innocent people and they widowed women. So Operation Sindoor is a rightful name. India has fought back against terrorist hideouts. Now time will tell how much Pakistan wants to escalate this.
I think justice has been served, and it was a well-deserved effort, a diligent one by the army, by the government of India. And let's hail the king. Mr. Modi, please.
This is a good thing, but it should have happened long ago. They killed our innocent people, so it's a good thing this happened to them. Most people are happy because of this action. No one has any problem with it. The government should have acted much earlier.
So just some responses from the streets of Delhi. Beenish, what's the response been in Pakistan amongst ordinary people?
As of now, of course, after this escalation, largely Pakistani people are standing behind the government, are standing behind the military. It's a national crisis for the country. If Pakistanis see it as a matter of survival. So they are backing the government. You see in the media, you see in the emotions. I've spoken with my family, some of my relatives, some journalist friends, and there is a lot of unity, and they are, despite so many other domestic problems and challenges because of which we understand the current government was not very popular. The military people have their own criticism against military, but with this crisis, do you see a unified, a lot of unity in Pakistan? I would still say that there's still a lot of concern, and Pakistanis would not want war. And this is something that this concern and this fear, you do feel. When you speak with people, of course they are now behind the government and the military, but then Pakistan is a country which is still recovering from a very severe economic crisis.
Right.
And when two countries go in a war, it's not good news for the country, economically, financially, its future. So there's a lot at stake. And I think Pakistani public is also understanding that.
I do want to talk to you about this whole potential escalation to war, if that is a given. But let's bring that up a little later. But then, given the mood that you described in Pakistan right now, is pressure also building on the government for some sort of a military response, given that Pakistani forces have been given that authority to take corresponding actions?
I think why there is a fear or there is concern that things may not end here and there may be an escalation is because if you look at from Pakistan's point of view, Pakistan sees it as a huge aggression from India. For example, a lot of analysts in Pakistan are saying that India has crossed two significant thresholds in its military action. For the first time, it has carried out multiple strikes in multiple sites, and that is unprecedented. Some of the strikes have been across LOC in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, which is not very surprising. We know in 2016, there were cross-border strikes, then also in 2019. But what is making it quite shocking or alarming for Pakistani officials is that India has carried out strikes in Punjab province of Pakistan, which Pakistan definitely considers it as it's the heartland of Pakistan. It's the most populated province of the country, and Indian strikes happening there. Of course, India says that it has attacked terror centers. It blames Lashkar-e-Taiba, militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba. It blames Jaish-e-Mohammed that they have their centers, training centers there. But these are allegations that Pakistan has publicly denied. Pakistan says that all of the sites were civilian sites. Pakistan has also said that most of the attacks were carried out on mosques. We cannot independently verify these claims. These are claims made by Pakistani officials, but they are claiming that they were civilian targets and civilians were killed in this attack, which of course...
Do we have details about any potential casualties? What are the kind of casualty
The
figures?
latest that we have been hearing is that at least 26 people have been killed. Several have been injured. Pakistan says that all of those who were killed were civilians, including women and children. But again, it is really hard for journalists to independently verify these claims. We have, I spoke to one of the reporters overnight who was actually very close to a site in Bahawalpur in southern Punjab province. And he went to the hospital and he said that everybody was there tight-lipped. Like they were not telling any information about who was injured, who was, how many people have been killed. And I mean, he was so close to the site that he did hear the blast and then he rushed to the hospital. But it's, so for us, we are just getting this information from Pakistani officials. It's just so hard to get information from the ground.
I think it just bears repeating in case you're joining us in the middle of the stream. We're talking about the current tensions between India and Pakistan. It's just worth replaying those visuals that we have of India striking alleged terror targets in Pakistan. I mean, this is what Beenish is talking about. And Beenish, just looking at these visuals, I think if you're a member of the population, if you live in the city and you see something like that and you're driving, it is terrifying.
It is terrifying, and for me, it is terrifying, and then it also shows how valuable peace is.
Right.
And when that peace between two traditional arch enemies is damaged or is hurt, what the consequences can be. And this is something that, despite the tensions between Pakistan and India, despite decades of tensions between Pakistan and India, people in Pakistan don't expect to see anything like
and
this.
on this scale of attack,
This scale coming
for
from
India as well, it is also, I think, the most
And
expensive attack that India has ever carried out.
Again, not in
the most large scale.
Yeah, not along the line of control.
Yeah.
We were talking to, you were listening to Shalu talk over there, and I think you guys were also listening to her. The question of evidence keeps coming up. Pakistan raises the point about where is the evidence? How is it that Pakistan is linked to the attack in Pahalgam, which apparently the Indian forces wanted to avenge, and therefore these attacks were carried out. So we were talking to former Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Hina Rabbani Kar, earlier in the morning. I think it's an interview that you helped arrange, Beenish. But then we'd like to play an excerpt from that interview in which Hina Rabbani Kar raises this very point about evidence. Let's just have a listen first.
Now, for India to make a claim against Pakistan, maybe it's right. But for India to act on something without giving any evidence to Pakistan to solve this problem, if it even exists, or to the world, to be able to convince, it's pretty much like the press conference that they just did. No questions asked. They think they have the impunity to be able to do what they will without any questions asked, because India says, because India believes it as a rogue nation, I believe, they have found that right and been able to do that in 2019, got away with it. And now, I guess, the escalation ladder, or what they think is possible, within the realm of possibility. And as far as international law is concerned, I don't think they care much about it.
That was Hina Rabbani Kar talking to us earlier from Doha Airport, I believe it was, and she was saying that she's stuck over there because of these tensions, because airspace has been closed and flights have been rerouted in India as well. But there's two things. Let's just bring up the issue of the rogue nation part that you were saying. I mean, when she calls India a rogue nation, is that the feeling that most Pakistanis have? Because it's quite a claim to make, right?
Yeah, but Biresh, you have to understand that Pakistani officials say that the moment this attack happened, India immediately started blaming Pakistan. And
you're talking about the Pahalgam attack.
I'm talking about the Pahalgam attack on April 22nd, a very horrific attack. Civilians were killed. But then Pakistan says that immediately when the attack happened, India started pointing fingers at Pakistan. And of course, because of the history, there was immediately a concern in Pakistan that India may carry out some strikes.
Just sorry to interrupt. Just so our viewers know what they're looking at, these are visuals from in the immediate aftermath of the attack in Pahalgam, in which 26 tourists, in which 25 tourists and one local pony operator were shot dead. But please continue.
So, and then we saw that Pakistani officials immediately reacted and started doing these press conferences, starting reaching out to diplomats, that India has to provide us evidence if India is accusing Pakistan of being behind this attack. In Pakistan, categorically, very flatly denied any involvement in the attack. And then it also asked for a neutral investigation. I think what we saw was an effort from Pakistan that somehow there is a way out, that there is some negotiation between the two countries or even a third country involved that could carry out a neutral investigation so that India doesn't carry out these strikes.
I'm glad that you mentioned these 2 points about this neutral investigation and this aspect of evidence, because this is something that we can see in the chat as well. I think Nilay Chaturvedi is talking about dossiers being provided after the 26/11 attacks. That's the attacks in 2008 in Mumbai that India blamed again on Pakistan. And then I think there was Ravi Roshan who's also talking about India having given evidence after the Mumbai attacks. And they're right. I mean, India did provide evidence to Pakistan after the Mumbai attacks. But India believes that nothing major came of it.
I think we have seen also some reports, and Pakistani officials quote these reports, that even when India was speaking with diplomats against Pakistan or putting forward the case of India that Pakistan was behind this attack, India did not give enough evidence to even those diplomats.
Is there ever going to be a stage in between India and Pakistan in which both sides look at the evidence that the other provides and say, that's a smoking gun, and therefore now
But I think, Biresh, after 2000 attack, Mumbai attack, India did have this strategy. India did provide dossiers, even names to Pakistan.
Correct.
And of course, Pakistan was denying whatever, but India did hand over something.
Yeah.
In this case, Pakistan says that...
But then the Indian point is basically that, look, we hand over these things and we share information, and handing over a dossier is not the only communication that happens between India and Pakistan. So the Indian point is, look, we keep handing this over, but nothing major happens. Let's bring in the example of this neutral investigation, a joint investigation. A joint investigation was tried out after the attack on the Pathankot airbase in 2016.
Officials also went
Pakistani
there.
officials were given a tour of the Pathankot airbase by Pakistani investigators. I mean, who would have thought that would ever happen? And then a few months later, in September, you had an attack on the Indian Army base in Uri. So the Indian thinking there is, so you want a joint investigation, we do a joint investigation. You want dossiers, so dossiers are provided to Pakistan, and then nothing comes of it. In fact, after a joint investigation, we get attacked again. That is what the Indian government says. And I just wonder what the thinking in Pakistan there is. What is the counter there?
Pakistan's thinking is, yes, there's this history between India and Pakistan, but when a country so publicly blames another state of being behind a very brutal attack on civilians, then Pakistan has a right to at least have some evidence, some documents, something that shows that Pakistan is involved in it. And I think when Prime Minister of Pakistan went public and said that, he even invited other countries to become part of the investigation, or any neutral body that becomes part of the investigation. Pakistan was trying to distance itself from this terrorist attack. Now, there are also...
Beenish, tell me something. I mean, again, it's like, feel free to interrupt. It's just very interesting.
I'm just
because,
interested in listening to this. As is the chat, it's very clear.
Because Pakistan repeatedly keeps talking about a third party for mediation, for example, and everything. But then you look at things, instruments like the Shimla Agreement. Yeah? In the Shimla Agreement, both sides categorically decided, oh, look, we will decide things bilaterally. India keeps saying that we don't want third party mediation on anything. Then you have this experience with this joint investigation that didn't work out after the Pathankot attack. So why does Pakistan still hold out the hope that India will this time round say, actually what, let's have a joint investigation when it didn't work in the past?
Can I also tell you something about thinking in Pakistani political leadership and Pakistani military leadership is that India has completely undermined or ignored its relationship with Pakistan over last couple of years. India is, of course, a growing economic power, and there's this sense in Pakistan that India believes that it does not even need Pakistan, and India or Pakistan has acted in ways that were not acceptable to India, and therefore we don't need to work with them. And that kind of Pakistani officials say that we kept pushing for it to India to open some sorts of channels of communication, but then ultimately what we have been hearing from Pakistani officials is that with the current military chief in Pakistan, his point of view then changed, and he said, we have done enough, and now it's time that Pakistan also stops making this effort in asking India to negotiate, to have a political settlement, and that countries are becoming, there is almost no diplomatic, it's been
completely downgraded, especially after this attack. It happened also after the abrogation of Article 370
in Kashmir. That is in itself
Kashmir,
a problem, because when you have no contact, that means that there is no conflict management between two countries, and then you rely on third countries like the US or UN or China or like other countries to de-escalate when tensions happen. And so I think in Pakistan, yes, Pakistan has a history. It has been documented. Defense Minister of Pakistan has recently admitted that Pakistan has been carrying out, quote, dirty work of the Western powers in dealing with the Mujahideen at the time. I'm talking about the Cold War in 1980s when
the war in Afghanistan,
when Mujahideen were fighting the Soviet Union.
Correct. Yeah.
But I do think that Pakistan, there has been some understanding in the last couple of years. It's very difficult to, of course, then verify these claims, but Pakistani officials say that they did change and that they stopped funding these terrorist or militant outfits, and for various reasons, especially from international pressure, because Pakistan was in grey list of FATF, and it was causing a huge problem to Pakistan's reputation, to Pakistan's trade opportunity.
Right.
Pakistan says that under international monitoring, it has gone, it is now in the white list. So it has done its homework. It's not sponsoring any militant groups. So that's like the official Pakistan position. Of course, there are people who would disagree with that.
There is something I just need to, before we bring in a comment, there is just something I want to bring up, and I'm seeing this in the chat, and I want to talk directly to our community. I mean, you all are saying a lot about Beenish and myself, and who is biased, and the content of our thing. I would urge you all to look at this conversation in terms of two journalists trying to have a discussion on something that is a serious issue, which goes back decades. It cannot be resolved. We're not trying to resolve something. But I would just urge that you be slightly more respectful and accepting of a normal conversation that is trying to avoid hyperbole and overt nationalism, and just trying to get to the bottom of a very complex issue as much as we can in the time that we have.
I think that's well said, because there are a huge number of comments taking either one side or the other. So I thought Shan's comment, I think hopefully everybody will agree with this, which is that the perpetrators of the April attack must be brought to justice. I believe both Pakistanis and Indians can agree to this. So I'm hoping that maybe that is something that everybody will agree with, that, you know, rather than blaming one or the other, it's the perpetrators. And that has been the issue here so far.
And that is a very good point. There is something that I did want to bring up, and I do promise that I do want to talk to you about ties between India and Pakistan, because you have seen first-hand experience with this, and we will come to that, but a little later. But there is something that I did want to address, and this is this whole tension between two nuclear-armed neighbors, right? You cannot change your neighbors, and they're both nuclear-armed. So what are the risks over here? And I just wondered if I could just refresh people's memory for those who are not aware. We prepared a graphic just to look at 2016 and 2019. So look at some of the cross-border attacks that have happened recently. So in 2016, India attacked what it called terror infrastructure in Pakistan-administered Kashmir after this attack on the Indian Army camp in Uri. This happened in September. Then 3 years later, in 2019, this happened in February, Indian jets struck targets in Pakistan after a suicide bombing killed 40 Indian troops. And then Pakistan responded to this. It carried out its own air raid in Indian-administered Kashmir. The result, there was a dogfight between both air forces. India lost a MiG-21. The pilot was captured, Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman, but he was later returned. I just wanted to bring this up, Beenish, to sort of say that these were also strikes that happened not too far back in our past between two nuclear-armed neighbors. It did not erupt into all-out war, and the question of nuclear war was far removed from this equation. How do you explain that? What is the risk over here of all-out conflict between nuclear-armed neighbors versus these smaller intensity conflicts? What is the thinking here?
I think both Pakistan and India are very well trained to maintain limited conflict. And they are very good also, or experienced with conventional war. And so even though both are nuclear-armed countries, there is still an understanding that both of the countries will somehow, for example, what we have seen right now, that India carried out strikes, Pakistan responded, that there will be no talk of use of nuclear weapons. But there is a risk always. And therefore, when there is stress, when there is tension between India and Pakistan, there is some nervousness in the world. Even though both countries themselves are very trained and they exactly know how each other will react. And I think India was expecting a reaction from Pakistan. Pakistan was expecting an airstrikes from India. So both of the countries can maybe, they know the calculated risks, but the world becomes nervous because there are two nuclear-armed countries and there can be a miscalculation. There can be mistakes made. Imagine if Indian pilots are killed or Pakistani pilots are killed, or somehow there is like an unexpected escalation, then where would things go? I
mean, that escalation we saw in 1999, for example, right? In the Kargil conflict.
Yes.
Some call it a conflict, some call it a war. It was a war that lasted more than 2 months.
And more than 1,000 people were killed.
More than 1,000 soldiers were killed. Indian and Pakistani armies faced off with each other. And that was way more severe than what we are seeing right now, what we saw in 2019 or 2016. And that sort of highlighted, didn't it, that you have two nuclear powers who are also conventional powers, and they can keep it within the conventional umbrella and not necessarily think of nuclear weapons as a real option, correct?
Yes, but for example, when India punished Pakistan with its diplomatic actions after the Pahalgam attack, it was many analysts in India. I was listening to, like different journalists, and they were saying that Pakistan has used, because then Pakistan also retaliated with its actions, and Pakistan had signaled. There was a statement in which Indian analysts were saying that Pakistan is signaling that if India blocks Indus Water Treaty, if India suspends Indus Water Treaty, then there is a risk or a chance that Pakistan may go and use nuclear weapons because it's a matter of survival for Pakistan. We don't know this, but there were some analysts who connected or linked the statement from Pakistan to use of nuclear. And Pakistan has first use of in
they
its
have the
doctrine.
first used nuclear doctrine.
So nothing will happen.
Sorry, that's something that's actually come up in the chat as well from Vivek, talking about that as well, asking.
How afraid do you feel when you think about two nuclear-armed?
I'm pretty afraid. And as
do you really think that there is a risk of a nuclear war?
I mean, I think when you've got nuclear weapons, there's always a risk, and that's the issue. Aditya Kapoor says here, there's a massive trust deficit between both nations due to past instances, and that is the major problem here, isn't it? You were talking about the lack of communication that's been going on between the two sides, and surely any escalation is a threat, and that's obviously what the international community is particularly worried about.
But I think it's just important to sort of place that the nuclear threat within the context of how both armies work. I think they are both very experienced armies. They're professional armies, and they're conventional armies. They have their conventional powers as well as nuclear weapons powers. So pressing the nuclear button doesn't come as an immediate thing. Although threats do fly around when it comes. Which is not to say you can always rule out the risk. Whenever there's a nuclear weapon around, you will never know. There will never be 100% safety.
Risk is always there.
But the idea is you are talking about two professional armies. So even though there has been a lot of jingoism on display, I see that in India, I see that in Pakistan, when it comes to the armed forces, it is very cold, calculated moves based on what can be carried out, what can't be carried out.
I do have a question here from DeVos who's asking which country has the biggest military capability. Is that possible to answer?
The simple answer is India.
Yeah, I think...
simple answer is in terms of the standing army, in terms of most other things. But then this is the interesting thing. When people bring up this question of which is a bigger army, because you're big doesn't mean, therefore, you win. I mean, there was an Indian analyst I was listening to on some other subject, and he brought out this point that it is not simply a question of being able to beat Pakistan convincingly, because that does not happen in a war, because Pakistan has been able to have conventional military parity with India. The very fact that India cannot defeat Pakistan convincingly, as this analyst was saying, tells you a lot about the military prowess that Pakistan has. So even though India might have more men, more numbers, more standing army, doesn't necessarily mean it's a walkover.
And it's a security state. Pakistan, since its creation, has been a security state. So the military has always had funding. The military is the most, even if we criticize the military, it is the most disciplined institute. There has been always, military takes major chunk of the budget. It has never stopped advancing its goals. It has always considered India as a threat. And because of that threat, Pakistani military always continued to work on improving its defenses. Pakistani military has also been trained because of domestic threats of Pakistani Taliban, because of its counter-terrorism operations, because of insurgencies in the country. So there are different ways, I would say, that Pakistani military is also quite advanced. Not as may not be as strong as Indian military, but it has its own strengths.
Correct. We're talking about de-escalation potentially, and we're talking about how both countries' militaries work. I think it's worth bringing in some global responses that we've been hearing to these strikes by India into Pakistani territory. We have a collection of sound bites. Let's just play those sound bites and then talk about what the rest of the world could potentially do, what other powers could do in this particular crisis.
No, it's a shame. We just heard about it just as we were walking in the doors of the Oval. Just heard about it. I guess people knew something was going to happen based on a little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. They've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
We are deeply concerned that this incident could incite retaliation and escalate to a full-scale military conflict. To ensure peace in South Asia, we strongly call for both India and Pakistan to exercise restraint and stabilize the situation through dialogue. China opposes all forms of terrorism. We call on both India and Pakistan to prioritize peace and stability, remain calm and restrained, and avoid actions that could further complicate the situation. We are willing to work together with the international community and continue to play a constructive role in easing current tensions.
So just 3 reactions over there, but you also had Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, calling for maximum military restraint. The UAE has also been appealing for restraint.
And many countries have. Russia has it as well. Exercise restraint. Germany as well. Escalation must be prevented. France has called for restraint. I mean, obviously, the nation, the international community is concerned about this.
And which countries do you think, Beenish over here, can sort of actually play a role? And the reason I sort of asked that question is basically because in 2019, for example, we saw when it came to returning the captured Indian pilot, there was pressure brought to bear on Pakistan by the United States. I think the UAE and Saudi Arabia were also involved. And these are also the very same countries that India reached out to after these strikes and informed them of these strikes. Do you think that there is a role for special countries here, specific countries here, I meant, to maybe dial down tensions and reach out?
We've heard this statement from White House where they have said that Marco Rubio has contacted both Pakistani officials and Indian officials and has urged a de-escalation. And I think, of course, it's the US, the most important country that can play an important role in de-escalation. But I think Middle Eastern countries, and Pakistan has also been speaking with these countries. So I think they can play some sort of role in de-escalation. And these are the kind of statements that we are hearing after the attacks, after these strikes, and after Pakistan's retaliatory strikes, that at least these countries immediately want a de-escalation, and so that it's not further intensified.
We're talking about de-escalation between 2 countries who currently have some of the lowest levels of diplomatic engagement in recent years. But it wasn't always the case, was it? I mean, there were periods between India-Pakistan history in which there was a lot of engagement and there was actually hopes for peace, right? I mean, you've experienced them yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I can talk about that, but I was... Pakistan and India have these interesting, very, very fascinating ups and downs in their relationships. For example, just before Kargil, 3 months before Kargil, Nawaz Sharif and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, they had met, and it was such
the Pakistani Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister
and Indian Prime Minister
who travelled there in a bus across the now closed Wagah-Atari border.
And then both of these countries were coming together, and public from both of the countries were also backing these 2 leaders. And then Kargil happened, and of course, what we hear from India is that Pakistani forces infiltrated, and then that led to Kargil war, that led to a military coup in Pakistan.
You know, it really hurt Indians. I mean, I was there in India when all this was happening. Just to sort of, I didn't mean to interrupt you, just to sort of bring in this aspect. It really hurt Indians to know that while their Prime Minister was on a bus heading into Pakistan, he was greeted by Nawaz Sharif. I remember those visuals at the Wagah-Atari border. There were dancers around that bus, the Delhi-Lahore bus service. And at that time, the Pakistani military was potentially preparing bunkers, fortified bunkers in Kargil, inside Indian territory, unbeknown to the Indian army. And that is something that really rankles
and that is
in
a
India.
Problem also.
It leads to that trust deficit, doesn't it?
Sometimes the military leadership and the political leadership in Pakistan have clashed over how Pakistan will see India or maintain its relationship with India. And even after 2008 Mumbai attacks, we saw that there was a complete lull between 2 countries. But then in 2011, S.M. Krishna and Hina Rabanikar, so just after a few years, S.M. Krishna and Hina Rabanikar, the then Foreign Minister of Pakistan and Foreign Minister of India, they were in Islamabad. It was just like one of my first most exciting reporting assignments. And SM Krishna had brought I guess 24 Indian journalists with him. But Islamabad was all you would see Indian journalists all over in Islamabad, and they were making headlines. Any statement that was coming out from Hina Rabbanikar and SM Krishna, they were the headlines, and Pakistani channels and Indian channels were reporting on it. They were 24/7. It was the big news. And even at that time, there was a lot of public support. There seemed to be a lot of public support on both sides. Pakistan and India were working on composite dialogue, which had different, I think, 8 kind of different segments, including terrorism, water treaty, cross-border cooperation. And both of the countries announced visa restrictions, and they were clappings in press conferences. And
so what went wrong? Why did it all fall apart then?
I mean, this is the problem between Pakistan and India, that you see these, because I think it's natural that people are attracted to each other because they were one country.
They were one country for a long time.
Don't blame me.
No.
Being the Brit sitting around the table.
No, we're not going to do that. But it's interesting to talk about these times, because in Pakistan there sometimes appears this visceral hatred of the Modi administration. And when it comes to lots of analysts and at least people from the government talking about Narendra Modi, they keep talking about, this very divisive leader, this Hindutva leader and everything. But again, it's also worth mentioning that even in Narendra Modi, when he was sworn in 2014, he invited the leaders of not just Pakistan, but other neighboring countries to his inauguration. And then he also made a surprise stop by in Islamabad, remember, to meet Nawaz Sharif, for example. So there was this door to friendship that was opening. But then again, that was closed. And I think in 2016, that was one of the biggest with the closures on Indian face, because you had this attack on the Pathankot airbase, and then just a few months later, you had the Uri attacks in September. So it's just, you're right, it happens in phases, and India is left scratching his head as to why, when maybe there are steps to peace. And I don't know if Pakistan has the same, if the establishment in Pakistan thinks of it in that same way.
They don't.
Or if it has any control over that.
No,
they don't. They do not. Okay.
They do not, because and this is a very clear narrative that I hear from Indian officials, from Indian journalists, that they see, in this way, they see Pakistan as, a country that has sponsored terrorist groups. It's a country that is behind these militant outfits that attack India. Pakistani establishment right now we also have to say that Pakistan, Kashmir is central to its foreign policy with India. And that kind of, after 2019, when India abrogated the Article 370, which gives autonomy to Kashmir, that I think was something that Pakistan felt that it has completely lost its most important element when it comes to foreign policy with India. I think that was the big dent that Pakistan says, that it kind of completely made Kashmir irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And this is what Pakistan, the whole policy of Pakistan with India is around Kashmir. Kashmir has always been a part of negotiations.
Correct.
Or
it's
any
been the
talks.
cornerstone of Pakistani foreign policy, arguably, not just a policy with India, because over the years there's always been these attempts to internationalize the Kashmir issue, but that hasn't worked out. At least India would argue it in that fashion. But I just wonder, at a people-to-people level, this is very interesting, because I also met Pakistani journalists when General Musharraf was in India, and they had come down to Delhi, and they were really warm-hearted, and it was like talking to old friends, people I'd never met before, but it was just easy to engage in conversation. We speak the same language, and we eat the same food. But then you have the current Pakistan Army chief making that speech that he made a couple of weeks before Pahalgam, talking about us being a different people. Was it 2 weeks? I'm forgetting.
I think it was a few days before the Pahalgam,
not a few weeks. It was a few days.
Attack.
General Asim Munir making that speech. And just remind our viewers as to what he said, because I remember parts of it. He was talking about us being both Indians and Pakistani being a completely different people. There is absolutely nothing common between them. He was also, I think, talking about Kashmir being Pakistan's jugular vein or something like that.
Yes, okay.
I mean, that speech just came out of nowhere and
Yeah.
it left many in India wondering what is going on here.
Yes, and many of Indians were also linking the attack with the speech. But I would say that basically what the Army General was trying to do was talking about two-nation theory. And so he basically was talking about a concept before partition of India and Pakistan that Muslims need a separate homeland and they cannot live in a country with Hindus. That was the base of two-nation theory, and that led to this movement of a separate homeland for Hindus and a separate homeland for Muslims. But honestly, I was also very surprised when he said that, you know, we have a different culture from Hindus, their way of thinking is different, their way of life is different, because I don't remember in last couple of years that Pakistani leadership has said that publicly, again, not against, but saying this two-nation theory that Hindus and Hindus and Muslims are different. This is, for me, was surprising, but Biresh, I also think we have to understand the context also. I think there is a worry in Pakistan that the BJP-led government in India does thrive on communal policies, and they do believe that India belongs to Hindus, and so we have to understand that context. But I myself was very surprised by this statement. But calling Kashmir the jugular vein, or in Urdu is like Shehrag of Pakistan, this is something that I have been listening even when I was a kid. This has always been Pakistan's, so that is not surprising at all.
But it's just the manner in which it was delivered. It was very provocative. We unfortunately don't have a clip of that because it was said in Urdu. I mean, there's a lot of context there that needs to be brought in. But the manner in which it was delivered, right? I mean, it was very provocative. It was almost angry, was it not?
Because this army chief is seeing India as a traditional enemy. So
explain this to me. I mean, why? It's not just this army chief, but then the Pakistani army has always viewed India from the time of Pakistan's creation as the enemy. Why is that? What is the reasoning behind that?
I mean, we have to go back to the 1947. Pakistan is created. It's a very poor country, but it has, after its creation, it had a large army. And many analysts would argue that for Pakistani military at that time to remain relevant, it needed a threat. So some would say that even it created the threat of India. And India did become a threat for Pakistan because Kashmir was a disputed territory from the beginning of the partition. We know that Pakistani militias attacked. It was immediately after the partition. I mean, I'm not sure about the dates, but immediately after after a few months after partition, and then Kashmir was never resolved. Both India and Pakistan started claiming, and then Pakistani military from the beginning was powerful, and it kept working on, or it kept making India this strategic threat. For years, it was a threat for Pakistani military with different conflict like Siachen, Kashmir, Sar Creek. Like, I remember I have studied all of this in my Pakistan studies syllabus.
That's good.
And we were taught all of this, and that we were also told that Pakistan has won all wars with India.
That is disputed. I mean,
I think I'm allowed to come in here a bit, as I said before, saying I'm the Brit in the room. Quemal Chima has been putting a lot of comments in the chat about the British and how much of this comes back to them. You just mentioned 1947, so I will just read this from Quemal. In 1947, the empire did not simply leave, as in the British Empire. It divided, humiliated and withdrew, leaving behind a blueprint for conflict. Partition was policy and rupture was governance. And so he goes on and basically saying that that is why the two nations are so divided. So I'll just leave it there. I feel I can say that because I am British. So we've also been taught, we were taught a lot when we were at school, you know, about our colonial past, which wasn't pretty. So I will just mention that there. And then I'll leave you both to it again.
Yeah, no, this is not a new argument. I've heard this argument a number of times. But then my counter to that has always been, well, you know, that might have been true in 1947 and maybe for a decade after that. But then both countries have been independent for the better part of 70 years or more. And there has been enough time between that partition and now for these countries to carve out their own independent identities as they have. But then there do appear to be certain vestiges of the past that appear to be very hard to leave behind. And this is something that at least when India sees this talk about the two-nation theory, there are those in India also who keep talking about the two-nation theory as being a legitimate theory. But then those numbers, I mean, there are people who believe that, but then there's also an equal number of people who go like, you know, we are neighbors, we need to get along because we can't change our neighbors. And we cannot keep having this continued strife, if you like, with your neighbor. But no end appears to be in sight because we are right now in a stage, I think, after 2016 particularly, India crossed the Rubicon, right? Anytime some militant attack like this could be linked to Pakistan, India is in a position that it will have to respond. It has normalized that. It normalized that in 2016, 2019, and now.
I think it's also very dangerous.
It is a dangerous spiral.
But what will happen in the future? How long will it continue? And every time Pakistan will respond because it wants to maintain its deterrence.
So that is the question. What does happen next?
I think Beenish has the answer to that.
If you ask me, I don't have to be a reporter right now, but I really I think Pakistan and India should fight wars against poverty. They should fight war against climate change. Pakistan and India both. I mean, this argument is completely unpopular right now, whatever I'm saying. Nobody would even listen to what I'm saying. But these are realities in that region. There are more than 1.5 billion people that are living in that country. They cannot live under a state of this fear that these two countries will go to war. And climate change, for just only climate, India and Pakistan are among the top 10 most affected countries by climate change. Hundreds of people die there every year because of extreme weather events. Both countries can work together to counter the effects of climate change or work together to develop policies together. Both are heavily polluted countries. So people are suffering there. Health is a crisis. No country on Human Development Index can say that we are better. I mean, militarily, I think one country can say. But when it comes to Human Development Index, I think both India and Pakistan really need to improve. But the militaries take up so much of budget because of valid reasons. I understand that. But I also think that there's huge number of people that are living there, and they can, if there's prosperity, if there's peace, and I'm sitting in Europe and I have experienced it firsthand. When there is peace and when there's stability, there can be a lot of prosperity, and people are not that bad actually. When you actually meet people.
He's not that bad, is he?
If you meet me and talk to me, it's fine.
So the hatred also comes from politics and policies of countries.
What do you think, Alex?
Oh, gosh. I feel like I'm a bystander enjoying the conversation and learning a huge amount. So, but I agree that there are bigger issues as well, which have definitely fallen off the agenda because of the way we are at the moment in the world.
What do you think, Dustin?
I mainly want to say tell the chat, guys, we are so sorry we can't get to all of your questions, but
it's been pretty alive, hasn't it? I mean,
it's been pretty lively in the chat, and you know, we don't want to repeat topics, and then sometimes we have this, like, we do have a little plan before we start the stream, like, of what we want to talk about when, so sometimes it can seem like, oh, why are you not coming to that topic? And then it's kind of with the speech, right, I knew that would come up now, so I didn't, like, that's why sometimes it can seem for a while that we can't get to your question right away, but we're really trying to, like, cover it as broadly as possible and give you, like, broad insights and let lots of opinions be mentioned on the show. So
That's the
thanks,
process.
guys,
That's the
for
process.
joining in the chat.
There's something I just want to sort of bring out. I mean, you're right, wage war and poverty not on each other. There is this, I've met Pakistanis. You're not the first Pakistani I've met. I've spoken to Pakistanis, and it's always been a great conversation and everything, because we were one people, as you say, and there is a shared history here. But it is very interesting. When I sit here in Europe and I look at what changed things in Europe, I always think of the people. It is people-to-people contacts. I firmly believe, it's a very personal view, and I'm bringing it out on News Desk. I know I normally ask the questions, but then here I'm just going to give you my view on things. It's people who ultimately make change. And when people meet other people, they realize, I have never, ever come across an interaction with my friends when they have met Pakistanis or vice versa, when they've said it was a bad interaction. In college, I used to play badminton with Pakistani friends, and we just played games like normal people. And
because you were in London.
When I was in London. In India, you don't have that opportunity because traveling is a problem. Yeah. And therefore, I believe that there needs to be more people-to-people contact at the subcontinental level, because at the moment, I think the mistrust between both countries, and I mean at the governmental level particularly, is so high. And that is important because that determines, as we are seeing right now, the visas that are given to people or the visas that are pulled back from people, the land borders that get closed and people cannot trade, people cannot meet.
Pakistan and India always had track 2 diplomacy.
Exactly.
So there was one at official level, but there was one with academics, like journalists,
just people meeting each other. Correct.
And they were also very powerful.
Yeah. But my argument was always that we need to expand that even further to the ordinary people level. I've had friends who've gone to Lahore, who've gone to Karachi, when people have said, and they've gone to see cricket matches, for example, and when people have learned that these are Indians, they have not been allowed to pay a single rupee for the food that they have had. We had that run in the early 2000s. So there is that kind of history, and therefore I really believe that people-to-people contact is the way out. But that's what I believe anyway.
Yeah.
Should we? Is that the end of the news desk today?
Because, we just have to, I guess, hope that things do not escalate and that somehow the international community can work with both India and Pakistan to try to calm things down, because at the moment it's certainly not heading in a good direction. I think that's the best way to conclude.
And Beenish, thanks so much for coming in and being frank with your views. Dustin, thanks so much for managing the chat. Alex, it's been a pleasure. As Alex was saying, we don't know where this is going to go. We really hope that next week we are not talking about this again, and maybe temperatures have calmed down a bit until next week. But then next week you will be able to see what our theme is, our topic is, 24 hours in advance. And again, apologies for pivoting at the very last minute away from the Ukraine discussion as we had advertised, but you will see why we needed to do this, because of these major tensions that have now developed.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody for all your comments in the chat. It's been very, very lively and quite feisty. I think we can say that. We'll definitely see you next week. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.